I am 81 years old, and I am sitting in the same leather chair I've sat in every evening for the past 6 years. It's 7 o'clock. The house smells like coffee I made this morning and never finished. The windows haven't been opened in weeks because there's no one here to complain about the stale air. And right next to me, on a small wooden table my wife picked out 30 years ago, sits a beige landline telephone covered in a thin layer of dust. I just ran my finger across the receiver, left a streak through the gray, like I was writing my name on a foggy window. And I realized something that made my chest tight. If that phone rang right now, I would probably jump out of my skin. I've forgotten what it sounds like. That's not a figure of speech. I genuinely cannot remember the sound of my own telephone ringing. Let me tell you something they don't warn you about when you're young and arrogant and think you've got everything figured out. You don't lose people overnight. There's no single dramatic moment where everyone walks out the door. No, it's slower than that. Quieter. You train them, year by year, conversation by conversation, to live without you. You teach them that you don't need them, and eventually, they believe you. They stop reaching. They stop calling. And one day you wake up at 81 years old, alone in a house full of furniture and silence, and you realize the phone doesn't ring because you spent a lifetime convincing everyone you didn't want it to. I was a corporate attorney for 40 years. 40 years of 80-hour weeks, corner offices, and courtroom victories that meant everything to me and nothing to the people who actually loved me. I measured my worth in billable hours. I measured my success by the size of my bonus check. I thought I was building something. I thought I was providing. But what I was really doing was constructing a fortress around myself, brick by brick, and calling it strength. I missed my daughter Emily's 8th birthday because I was preparing a deposition. I told myself she wouldn't remember. She's 53 now. She remembers. I missed my son Thomas's high school graduation because a client needed me in Chicago. I sent flowers. Flowers. Like that could replace a father in the audience. I missed anniversary dinners, school plays, soccer games. I missed the small moments that weren't small at all. And every time my wife Margaret tried to talk to me about it, tried to reach me, I'd grunt from behind the newspaper or give her a distracted nod while my eyes stayed locked on case files. I told myself I was low maintenance. That was the word I used. I never called anyone first. I never asked for help. I never admitted when I was struggling. Because in my mind, needy people were weak people. Dependency was a character flaw. I prided myself on not needing anyone for anything. I thought that made me strong. I thought that made me admirable. I was a fool. You want to know what I remember more vividly than any courtroom victory? The smell of my corner office, leather chairs, and ambition, and that particular staleness of recycled air conditioning. I spent more hours in that room than I ever spent in my daughter's bedroom. I knew the night janitor's name, but I couldn't have told you what perfume my own child wore. I knew the pattern of the ceiling tiles above my desk, but I couldn't describe the view from my son's apartment because I'd only visited twice. I told my children that feelings don't pay mortgages. I actually said those words out loud to my own kids when they came to me looking for comfort, for connection, for a father who could be something more than a provider. And I dismissed them every single time because I believed the lie. I believed that money was the point, that success was the scoreboard, that if I just worked hard enough, long enough, accumulated enough, everything else would sort itself out. It doesn't sort itself out. It falls apart, slowly, quietly, while you're not paying attention. 6 years ago, my wife Margaret was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave her weeks. I remember sitting in the oncologist's office, and for the first time in 40 years of legal practice, I couldn't find any words. I'd spent my career arguing, persuading, commanding rooms full of people. But sitting in that sterile office, with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I was silent. Margaret spent her final days in a hospital room on the 4th floor of St. Anthony's, room 412. The walls were pale green, the kind of green that's supposed to be calming, but just looks sick. There was a window facing the parking lot, and I remember watching people come and go, living their normal lives, while my wife's breaths grew shorter, and the machine beside her bed beeped in a rhythm I started to hate. The room smelled like antiseptic, and something else underneath, something I don't want to name. The sheets were thin and scratchy, and no matter how many blankets I asked the nurses for, Margaret always seemed cold. I held her hand sometimes, but even then, even in those final days, I didn't know how to do it right. I'd hold her hand like I was shaking it, like we were closing a deal, because that's all I knew. It was 2:47 in the morning when everything changed. I know the exact time because I was staring at the clock on the wall, watching the second hand move, counting the spaces between her breaths. The hospital was quiet, that particular kind of quiet that only exists in the middle of the night, when the visitors are gone and the hallways are empty, and it's just you and the machines and the person you're losing. Margaret's eyes opened. She'd been asleep for hours, and I thought she might be gone already. But her eyes opened, and she looked right at me. Her hand moved under mine, and I felt her fingers trying to squeeze. But she didn't have the strength anymore. She said, "Tell the kids I love them." And I froze. Not because I didn't want to say it, not because I didn't feel it, but because I realized, in that horrible fluorescent lit moment, that I couldn't remember the last time I'd said those words myself, to anyone. I couldn't remember the last time I told my children I loved them. I couldn't remember the last time I told my wife. She was looking at me, waiting. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just asking me to deliver a message. She was giving me a chance. One last chance to crack open, to say it back, to be, for once in my miserable, stubborn life, emotionally available to the woman who had loved me for 42 years, despite every wall I'd built. And I said, "You'll be fine." I said those words to my dying wife. "You'll be fine." Another deflection, another dodge. Because even at the end, even when it was the only moment that mattered, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be vulnerable. I couldn't open my mouth and say 3 simple words that every child learns before they can tie their shoes. Her hand went limp in mine. She didn't die right away. That would have been too merciful, too clean. She held on for another 3 hours while I sat there in that uncomfortable plastic chair, replaying those final words over and over in my head. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Like I was reassuring a client about a pending verdict. Like I was delivering a legal opinion instead of saying goodbye to my wife. She died at 5:52 in the morning. I was holding her hand when it happened. And I didn't cry. I wanted to. Somewhere deep inside, I could feel it trying to surface. But I'd spent so long burying everything that I didn't know how to let it out. I just sat there, holding her cooling hand, staring at the pale green wall, listening to the machines go silent. The funeral was 4 days later. My son Thomas flew in from Seattle. My daughter Emily drove down from Portland. We stood in the cemetery, the three of us, while the minister said words I don't remember. And when it was over, when the other mourners had given their condolences and drifted away, Thomas walked over to me. He stood 2 feet away, close enough to embrace, close enough that I could see the redness in his eyes, the grief he was carrying, the little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. He was 49 years old, but in that moment, I could see every age he'd ever been. Every time he'd reach for me, and I hadn't been there. I extended my hand for a handshake. At my own wife's funeral, I offered my grieving son a handshake. Thomas looked at my hand. He didn't take it. He just stared at it for a long moment, then nodded once, turned, and walked away. Emily hugged me briefly, the kind of hug you give a distant relative. And then they were both gone, and I was standing alone in the cemetery, my hand still half extended, realizing I had no idea how to be anything other than what I'd always been. That was 6 years ago. I've seen my children 3 times since, twice for Christmas, once for Thomas's 50th birthday, which I almost missed because I wrote down the wrong date. They have families now, spouses, children, lives that I've barely touched. My grandchildren call me Grandpa Robert, and there's a formality in it that tells me everything I need to know. Now I sit here every evening at 7 o'clock, staring at that dusty landline phone like it's a gravestone marking everything I've lost. My children have cell phones. They have busy lives in different states. They have families who need them, jobs that demand their attention. They became exactly what I taught them to be: independent, self-sufficient, capable of living without needing anyone, capable of living without needing me. Last Christmas, Emily called. I know it was obligation, not desire, because I could hear it in her voice. That careful politeness you use with strangers. We talked for 12 minutes. I watched the clock the whole time, just like I did in that hospital room. And in the background, I heard her husband whisper, "Almost done? Almost done." 12 minutes of duty. That's what I've earned after 81 years of living. That's the return on my investment of emotional unavailability. Sometimes, when the silence gets too heavy, I pick up the phone receiver just to hear the dial tone, just to have proof that the line still works, that I'm not completely severed from the world. I hold it to my ear and listen to that steady hum, and it's the most consistent voice I hear all week. My neighbors don't know my name. The mailman is my most consistent human contact, and he just leaves packages on the porch without ringing the bell. I've thought about getting a dog, but that feels like admitting something I'm not ready to admit. I did this. That's the part that keeps me awake at night. I did this. Deliberately. Slowly. Decision by decision. Silence by silence. Missed moment by missed moment. I built this empty house with my own hands, and now I have to live in it. So let me talk to you now. Not as a character in some story, but as an old man who made every mistake you might be making right now. That text your mother sent you 3 days ago, the one you've been meaning to respond to, answer it. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not when you're less busy. Now. That friend who keeps inviting you out for drinks or dinner or just to catch up. The one you keep telling, maybe next week. Stop saying maybe. Say yes. Show up. Be present. You think you're protecting yourself by staying closed off. You think keeping people at arm's length means you can't get hurt. You think being low maintenance makes you easier to love. You're wrong. You're not protecting yourself. You're building a tomb, brick by brick, the same way I did. Emotional unavailability isn't strength. It's cowardice wearing a suit. It's fear dressed up as independence. And people can only reach for you so many times before their arms get tired. They can only grab at air so many times before they stop trying altogether. And when they stop, you'll tell yourself it's because they didn't care enough. But the truth is, you trained them to let go. Make the phone call you've been putting off. Say the words you think people already know. Tell your children you love them, out loud. Tell your parents you appreciate them. Tell your friends they matter. Be inconvenient. Be needy. Be human, because I promise you, on everything I have left, which isn't much, sitting alone in a quiet house with a phone that never rings is a hell you cannot imagine until you're living it. I am 81 years old. I have a landline telephone covered in dust, a leather chair that knows the shape of my body, and 6 years of silence echoing off walls that used to hold laughter. Don't become me.